Well, well, well. Happy Jewish Lich Day, ya heathens. It's the magical day where Christians celebrate a Jewish rabbi running around with his pet rabbits, shitting out eggs, hiding them, and then sitting on his little messiah throne, menacingly stroking a fully grown bunny rabbit. He then chastises the Roman government and the Jewish Sanhedrin because they are too dumb to find his eggs before time runs out on the one special golden egg with the explosive surprise inside it. Now, every year we remember the sacrifice of this Jewish Lich King Jesus by hiding eggs, blaming bunnies, and eating chocolate, and guilt-tripping people into worshiping their passive-aggressive God King. Nothing convinces people more than guilt-tripping them into it. You mean to tell me that God sacrificed his Horcrux to save all of humanity from the sick, sadistic shit he's planning on doing to us all because someone ate a magical fruit salad after he told her ass not to? Sounds more like some weird divine BDSM fetish, if you ask me. Oh, the only thing that'll change my mind is if I clone and torture myself to death while watching from the corner cuck chair. That's how Daddy Yahweh likes it. But I'm supposed to feel bad about that? I'm supposed to feel responsible somehow. I didn't put that bootlicker on the cross, and a half-eaten fruit salad didn't damn humanity. God is supposedly all-loving, but what is all-loving about an all-powerful deity that needs excessive torture to change his mind? Not only is that sadistic, but it also doesn't make any pragmatic sense. How does the torture and murder of his son/himself absolve sin? Why does this blood magic work, but other blood magic doesn't? There aren't good answers for these questions, and that's kind of the point. Ultimately, I think that we can conclude that historically this shit never happened, and that makes Christian theology pragmatically useless. And if you disagree, then give us a call because the show is starting now.
Wow. All right. Tell us how you really feel, Godless. My goodness.
Yeah, that's pretty close. I had to pare it down because I know we're on the ACA, so I just
hold back a little bit.
I held back a little bit.
Well, welcome everybody. Today is April 20th, 420, if you celebrate. I am your host, the Cross Examiner, and with me today as the always great Godless Engineer. Thank you for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, and thank you everybody for who's watching right now. I can't wait to get into this whole Jewish Lich King Day.
Absolutely. Yeah, we should talk about that. Before we do, I'll remind everybody that the Atheist Experience is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, the ACA, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Today is Easter, the day, if I understand my Christian theology correctly, we traditionally, I don't know if we know the exact day, somebody could probably tell me, that we celebrate, or some people celebrate, the supposed resurrection of Jesus, which many Christians I know say is the most important event in all of Christianity. I think it would probably be the fall, which you described as the half-eaten fruit salad, because without that, nothing would be necessary. But the resurrection is, I guess, for Christianity, since it's all about Christ, would be important. I know, Godless, you are very studied in the sort of history or existing evidence, I guess we have, as to whether or not Jesus even existed, sort of a mythicist approach. What have your studies revealed about the evidence that's available to us now that the resurrection took place, or alternatively, that it was a legend of some sort? Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Well, I definitely think that the evidence leans towards first century Jews, what would become Jewish Christians, receiving revelation from the supposed resurrected Jesus. And so, but because of that, we don't have any actual records or anything like that of Jesus walking around on earth prior to his resurrection and like having a ministry, having disciples even. And so what we ultimately end up with is Paul in the New Testament saying that this resurrected Jesus has revealed his message to him, revealed the gospel that he is to preach to all Jews and Gentiles alike. And that's pretty much it for the evidence about Jesus and his sacrifice and all that kind of stuff. We don't any of the later like stuff like gospels, those are either fabricated or they're just so diluted with non-historical things that we can't sort out the historical items from the non-historical items. So ultimately, if we can't tell which one it is, then it's basically useless to us. And then everything else, past that and outside of that is based on like the Christian community at the time. So we don't really have any good evidence about like him being killed like on a cross or otherwise.
Gotcha. And if I recall correctly, Paul doesn't even place Jesus on earth necessarily. Is that correct? He sort of alludes to a Jesus that might be mystical or heavenly or something like that?
Well, yeah. So
he doesn't say, I ran into Jesus.
Right. Exactly. He never actually sees Jesus while he's walking around on earth. And he never alludes to anybody otherwise actually seeing Jesus while on earth. There are a few passages that people have tried to use to say, oh, this definitely means that the Romans crucified Jesus. But in those situations, he uses very vague language in order to describe these entities. So like these entities are called the rulers of this world and everything like that. And the weird thing about that is that they Paul uses that same language to describe Satan and all of his demons, his demonic force. And so like for Paul, the primary opposition to both Jesus and Christians alike is going to be the devil, Satan and his demons. And so like, yeah, the Romans are never directly mentioned by Paul, and Paul is very vague about who is responsible for Jesus's death.
Fascinating. All right. Well, if our viewers have other information that we've missed about the veracity of the resurrection claims on this Easter day, we'd love to hear from you, and you could educate us and maybe convince us that there's more there than we think there is. Meanwhile, I do have an announcement or two. We already have callers lined up, so I'll do a few announcements and then we'll get on to callers right away. First off, available on atheist-community.org are printable call-in flyers. Post these if you can, please. You can download them and print them and post them with permission, where if you're putting it on privately held land, to community bulletin boards and things like that, so people know that they can call our show and defend their faith. A second way to support us is by sending super chats. We already have one I'll read in a moment. We'll read as many super chats as we can. This is a YouTube feature. We assume that as long as they are YouTube appropriate. So be careful with that one. With that, I'll read the super chats we have, and then we'll get on to a callers and do more announcements later. First, we have Jonathan France for $5. He says, CE, cross-examiner, that's me. I met a lawyer who says testimony is not the weakest form of evidence. Is it? I was always told witness memory is the weakest versus DNA, etc. I think he means eyewitness. Maybe eyewitness testimony is not the weakest form, because it is a common thing that you will hear attorneys say eyewitness testimony is the weakest form of evidence, because memory is part of eyewitness testimony. I guess it was a subset. Maybe they're confining it, because if you're relying on your memory when you're testifying, you were an eyewitness to whatever you remember, right? You're not going to be assuming, there's no hearsay exception. You're not going to be saying, well, I remember that Godless told me that Dave said the blah, blah, blah. So you're presumably having a memory about something you witnessed or experienced. That said, let's talk just a little bit about this, because I do think it's important. One of the questions we always ask about the gospel is, what evidence do we have to support any of this? John, you're an expert in this, of course. But let's start with eyewitness testimony. Is there any eyewitness testimony in the gospel? As far as I know, church tradition for a long time said yes. And now recently, all scholars that are serious, even Christian scholars, say, no, that was church tradition. The gospels were written by anonymous authors. We don't know who even wrote them, much less where they got their information. These were probably all oral tradition carried down until the gospel authors wrote it down, and the earliest gospel was something like a generation after Jesus's death, something like 30 years after his death. So if we assume that, John, I don't know if, first of all, you can verify if my understanding is correct, but if we assume that, then the question comes in, if we don't even have any eyewitness testimony to any supernatural event in the Gospels, why is it that people believe? And that's why we have this call. So, John, is my understanding of the status of eyewitness testimony in the Gospels accurate? Are there any eyewitness testimonies in the Gospel?
Yeah. No, definitely not.
Okay.
The Gospels are not eyewitnesses. They're not written like eyewitnesses, and they don't read like eyewitness reports and all this other stuff. So
okay, good. So getting back to John France's question, is witness memory the weakness versus DNA, et cetera? I would put all memory related, including eyewitness testimony, in the quote unquote weakest category. I think the reason that lawyers will say it's the weakest is because it is given traditionally the most deference by a jury. If you're a finder of fact, a judge or a jury, and you've got somebody up there who's confident and charismatic, and they point at the defendant and say, I saw that person outside the bank right before it was robbed, they're going to believe it. If they have a cop in there that says, I wrote down on my notepad that the guy said that he showed up at the bank at 11, but videotape shows that he showed up at 10. They're going to believe that cop, even though the eyewitness may be wrong, or the cop may have made a transcription error when he wrote down what the guy said. All of that stuff. So I think it's any sort of witness-related testimony is given too much credence in the courts. And that's with events that you may have witnessed months ago and then were interviewed about it immediately after. The cops came to your neighborhood and said, hey, did you see the shooter? What did he look like that day? And then you still have mistakes regularly. We've had hundreds of people in this country, innocent people, locked up for either life or put on death row. Some even executed. Hundreds of people have been executed that after the fact DNA evidence showed that they were innocent. The Innocence Project is something you should go look at if you're passionate about this. But if we have that today, when there are cameras, when there are police interviewing you hours after the event you witnessed, doesn't that show to some degree that eyewitness testimony is very, very weak and memory is fallible? And if that's true, and we don't even have that for the facts that are claimed, the supernatural facts that are claimed in the Bible, how much can we trust in that, I guess is my take. So thank you for that super chat. I hope you got your $5 worth, Jonathan.
Well, yeah, I was gonna point out sort of a pop level example of this, and that's from the movie My Cousin Vinny. I don't know. Have you seen that movie?
Oh, every lawyer in the world loves that movie. It is super realistic and good.
Oh yeah. Well, that's good to hear.
Really good.
I was going to ask you a very important question. How long does it take to cook grits?
Are you telling me that the laws of physics don't apply in your kitchen?
Where you can cook grits in 5 minutes?
No self-respecting Southerner makes instant grits.
Right.
The jury all agrees.
Yeah. So in that movie, like one of the linchpins in the case, it was a murder trial. One of the linchpins is how long does it take this guy to make grits? Because he sees them go into the sack of suds, and then he cooks his grits and come back later, and then he sees them fleeing from it right after shooting the guy, and it's like, oh, how long does it take? I guess I don't know is what he ends up doing on the stand. So that's
no, it is an excellent film. I mean, the procedure stuff is all BS, right? Like there's a bunch of lawyers having arguments in front of juries and stuff. But the actual examples that they give in that is a perfect movie. Like if I was teaching a class to maybe high school students about what the legal system is about, what trials are like, I would take those scenes out of that movie, because you are showing the unreliability of people who genuinely are not trying to wrongfully convict the defendants, right? None of those people were like, oh, I'm going to get those meddling kids. They were convinced, they saw a car, and what are the odds that the same car would come in minutes later, et cetera, et cetera. So they just went along with the system, which is what happens. You can tell I sort of empathize with defense attorneys more. But yeah, it is another example example of how well-meaning people can just be wrong, and being wrong about something can actually have very, very serious consequences for people, strangers, innocent people. So don't put too much weight in that stuff. All right.
Yeah.
We'll do more super chats in a bit. We have callers. So if you don't have anything else, let's jump right into that. All right. Sounds good. All right. I'm going to talk to Vickie at this point. Vickie from North Carolina, she, her. It says here, Vickie, quote, "I am wondering if my belief in the word holds up." So do I understand that correctly? Why don't you explain to us what you're interested in talking about, Vickie?
Well, for one thing, I'm nervous, but the other thing is, I don't know. I've just gotten to where I cannot listen to preaching and sermons, and I've started listening to your atheist talks, and a lot of things that y'all talk about make sense. And I'm starting to see kind of the not holding up on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's concerning to me. So that's kind of where I am, but I still believe God is good.
Gotcha.
And so I'm stuck because what y'all are saying makes sense when you ask questions to people that call in. And I've always had those beliefs too in the past about rapture, all these things that I believed in. But now I am really starting to question all of those things. And she asked me what I am, like, am I a Christian, or I don't know what I am.
Sure. That
that's kind of where I am.
Well, don't be nervous. We're just having a chat here. B, you are doing really well so far. You're expressing your position really well, and you're explaining to us your dilemma. And then C, you're not alone. This is a very common situation for a lot of people. And to me, it's a healthy situation. You should always question people who are making claims, that the economy is getting better or not worse, or this person is a criminal or not, or this person, Jesus, was resurrected or not. All of those should be examined, right? Skeptically. And I think people cast the word skepticism or skeptic in a negative light in our society, and they misunderstand it a little bit. Skepticism just means, hey, I'm not going to accept a claim until I've become convinced through the proper amount of evidence. And then sort of the follow-up question is, well, what's the proper amount of evidence, right? What's enough of evidence to believe that that guy's a criminal, or the economy's getting better, or that Jesus was resurrected? And it sounds like you're in that space of, well, I'm starting to ask for evidence in my head, like, what evidence do I have that my beliefs are real? And now you're wondering what to do with those questions. Am I understanding you correctly?
That is correct. But where I was is I thought God was a tyrant, male chauvinist.
Okay.
I believed all those things for decades, to where I was even a housewife that believed in certain roles. And when I started to pick up the word, I was asking God, why do you hate me? Is it because I'm a woman? I saw how women were treated like cattle. I had all those. But as I read it, I saw a loving God, and I felt like I had been lied to all my life about who he was. So now I'm stuck in this thing where I don't believe what I've been told about God. But then at the same time, I hear y'all asking questions to people just like me. So I'm like so confused.
Understood. So let me ask John. John, I think, did you ever have a religious background, John? Were you ever in this situation?
Well, yeah, never this situation specifically, because I definitely have a different sort of perspective on it, being that, I was a white Christian male. So like, as a Christian, like, I didn't notice all the misogyny and everything in that. I'm just kind of curious if I could ask a clarifying question there, Vickie. Are you saying that you were being told that God is a misogynist and that he's a horrible being and everything like that, but now after reading the Bible, you come to the conclusion that he's actually a good God? Is that the correct progression there?
I know that sounds crazy, but yes, it's like getting away from what I was being told. It's like, I know that sounds contradictory, but
so
like, it's number 5, and that's
Numbers 5?
Yes, number 5 is about, it's about where the woman, the law of jealousy, and she has to drink the bitter water. Well, this woman goes and she's taken before the priest because she's thought to be an adulteress, and they do all this ritualistic things like putting it in a earthen vessel, making her drink. It's very demeaning. And I would go outside and I would just be like, who are you, God? This sounds satanic of what you would think would be done like in a back room somewhere, and it's in the Bible. And I questioned that for like a year. Like, why is this woman demeaned in such a manner that she has to drink? And if she's guilty, her belly will swell and her thigh will rot. But it wasn't until at the end of that where there's a woman that's proved not guilty and she produces fruit and she conceived. And I'm like, I thought that was describing the woman that's been made free. So that's what made me feel, I mean, all of it.
Right. Well, I find it. I don't mean to be combative or anything, but I find it rather interesting that you've chosen the one story that could conceivably be about abortion, or purity culture and everything like that, but as opposed to like the slavery that God commands in Leviticus 25:44-46, or what about how God, specifically commands Moses to go in and wipe out the Midianite people altogether, except for all the virgin girls, to force them into sexual slavery. To me, the bitter water or whatnot seems to be pretty mild as far as like atrocities go in the Old Testament, when compared to like these other things of the Bible. So I'm kind of curious as to how do you as far as your current view now of God being good, how are you rationalizing these Old Testament atrocities that are all over the Old Testament and this good nature of God?
I can tell you, and that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying this is spot on. I'm not going to ever be convinced that this is not right. I'm wondering if I've convinced myself of something also to be able to make it more palatable. So
what did you
correct.
read specifically? You said, hey, I was told this, or I believed the bad parts, and then I read the Bible and I saw a good God. What specific, did you read the entire Bible? Did you use a study guide, or did you read the Gospels? What parts of the Bible did you read to convince you that God is good? The character of God, at least in the Bible, is good.
It was just learning like different words. Like, I think the first thing was I was going through having MS, and I went to the Bible and I was looking at the verses about God promises to heal you, promises to give you this, had all the verses posted. And I was convinced, because what I was hearing people tell me on the radio was that God would give me anything that I wanted. So then one day I sat down and actually started to read them for myself. And I'm like, well, that's not exactly what it says. It's not promising me anything and everything. So
verily, verily, if there are two or more of you, ask for anything in my name, you shall have it.
Yeah, knock on the door shall be opened.
Verily means truly, truly, like not a metaphor, right? There's at least 5 that I can think of off the top of my head where God does say, or the characters in the Bible, Jesus or whomever, says, if you pray to move a mountain in real faith, you will move a mountain. Anything you ask for, if there's more than one of you, you shall get it. If you ask sincerely, you shall get it. This is a common, I've gone over this on my show. This is a common question that you ask people, and I'm interested to see why you think any other interpretation of that is true rather than the words that are printed on the page. The words that are printed on the page say, verily, hold on. Verily, verily, truly, truly. Yeah. Sort of literally, I'm not exaggerating here. You'll get what you want. And so I compare that text with the fact that I've never seen God heal an amputee, and I can't reconcile those two things. How did you reconcile those?
It's been a long journey, but I'll give you one in particular that stands out to me, and that is in the New Testament with Paul. When Paul's talking to the Corinthians, and he tells them, he says that he will be weak that they may be made strong, and that he's wanting them to be better. To me, he's saying to them that I trust that you will see that I'm your brother. Even though right now you're thinking I'm not your brother, I'm a reprobate, they're like, coming against him, but he's saying, I trust that you will believe and that you will see that I am a brother. I want you to be made strong. I will be willing to be weak. To me, that's giving anything you ask for in my name, because it's, to me, everything's centered around
isn't that
brotherly love.
Right. So isn't that taking
You know what I'm saying?
Hold on.
Yeah.
Isn't that taking one part of the Bible that's not related to Jesus saying, hey, if you pray for something, I'll give it to you? Isn't that taking one part to use it to modify another book that's written at a different time by a different person? I'm very curious. This is a very interesting take. It sounds like you've got sort of a spot you want to get to, and you're searching throughout the Bible for pieces to get you there, rather than read the Bible cover to cover and come away with an opinion as to the story it tells and the characters in the book. Because when I read the Bible cover to cover, I didn't use a study guide. I didn't go to Bible study and read only the chapters the church wanted me to. I just read it cover to cover, and I realized, wow, in the Old Testament, there's a God character here that's like the most evil thing I've ever seen in literature. And it doesn't get much better in the New Testament, because now we've got the concept of hell and eternal damnation, which is infinitely worse than anything that he was going to do in the Old Testament. That's what I come away with. Even if he is occasionally saying, hey, while you own slaves, be nice to your fellow citizens. While you are forcing young virgins into sex slavery, give up your possessions, right? Just because you've got some nice stuff that you find over here doesn't mean it absolves you of all the evil stuff. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
I do understand. And that's what I'm saying, though, is that you can't capture it. And to me, and that's what I'm trying to, maybe little by little listening to what y'all have to say and your talks is kind of helped me to kind of question some of these things too. But I don't think I can capitalize. It's not just one book. It's not just one verse. It's the overall of it all. I mean, it explains to us what actually is a virgin. And I mean, I could go on and on about, we say God was talking about gender when he was talking about women, but there's also a whole study of what a woman means in the word. There is a whole study about slaves.
But let's be real here. Let's be honest, okay? Yeah. There's not very much disagreement amongst even Christian scholars about the things like, hey, the Bible endorses slavery, right? That you could own people, you could beat them to within an inch of their life, you could pass them to their children. If they were women, they were sex slaves, they were property, all of this sort of stuff, right? So let's give you your version of the Bible. There's 10,000, a million pages, and 999,999 pages say, be nice to each other and all that sort of stuff. And then on one page it says, but while you do that, you can own other people as property. You can beat them. You can rape them. Women are worth less than men. I'm not going to teach you about science. I'm going to put stuff in there regarding hygiene that would actually kill you. There's one page in there that's just awful, evil stuff. What do you do with that? Even if there's 99.99% of it is good, which is not the case of the Bible. Doesn't that one section where this supposedly omnipotent, all-knowledgeable God is telling you all of this really horrible stuff to do, doesn't that make that character of that God, at least you have to question their understanding of the universe and humanity and morality?
But I feel like, and I'm just being honest, and this is why I'm confused, because when I called today, I didn't want to go, and she asked me which one to talk about today. I'm like, I don't want to come on here with just one pet peeve. Sure. When you talk about slaves and stuff, I get what you're saying, but when I read it, when it starts to come out, I mean, when he says, I think that y'all have quoted, I'm not good at quoting the actual verses, but about serve your masters, slaves serve your masters. But when he says you can't serve two masters, I mean, is he talking about slavery, what you're talking about, or is it me serving death and condemnation, or is it me serving life and forgiveness? I mean,
let's clarify what we're talking about, John. Hold on. Yes, I understand. So you're talking about the New Testament. We were talking about the Old Testament. We can get to the New Testament in a second. So, John, you had mentioned that. I don't remember the verses, but my recollection is owning people as property, right?
Right.
Exodus, Deuteronomy. There's multiple places where they talk about this.
Yeah, so there's Exodus 21 specifically says that you can own slaves as property. And then there's also Leviticus 25:44 through 46. It talks, God specifically says how you can go and you can purchase slaves from the nations around you. There's several different laws in the Old Testament that talk about, how to treat your slaves and all this other stuff. I feel like you're being a bit anachronistic with this whole you can't serve two masters kind of thing, because I believe that was Paul, if I'm not mistaken, in the New Testament that talks about how you can't serve two masters. And that's not talking about that's not like an anti-slavery sort of thing. That's more of like an anti-idolatry kind of verse there. Like you can't serve you can't serve money, like greed. You can't be greedy and also serve God. And honestly, that's just a way to separate the believers from their money.
Okay, but I'm just saying that there is tons of definitions for what, and to say, and I'm just being honest, the way I feel, what I was just thinking about when y'all were talking about, you can own somebody as property and make them your slave. But if we take into account, I was just thinking about this. Now, wait a minute. If you take into account that the slave, where it says that the slave is not in the house forever and it's the son, why would God be promoting slavery?
You tell us.
Slavery.
You tell us. And you're cherry picking a verse. You're cherry picking a verse. We need to explain for our viewers. Hold on, Vickie. Hold on. Yeah. Hold on. You're cherry picking a verse. Yeah. We are talking about there. It's okay. I understand. And what you need to understand is the Bible is 60 something books written by different authors at different times over, many, many, many eons. All right. So what we are talking about is in the Old Testament, it says you can own people as property, and then it divides those people into two categories, right? Hebrews and non-Hebrews. Mm-hmm. Hebrews, you have to treat nicer than non-Hebrews. Right. Non-Hebrews, beat the hell out of them. As long as they live for 1 or 2 days after you beat them and then die, you're not guilty of any crime. You can beat them to within an inch of their life. You're fine. You can have the women become sex slaves. You own them. You give them to your children as property. They have no right to refuse anything you want them to do. That's what we're talking about, owning people as property. Do not try to shift to some other definition of non-biblical or in another book. We're talking about those people, the non-Hebrews around you, were treated like the slaves you see in many, many popular movies about modern slavery, of just cruel, inhuman treatment of property. Our question is, how do you reconcile that the Bible endorses that? It doesn't say don't do this. It says you may do this. And then when the New Testament comes along, nothing Jesus says, oh, remember those old laws about how you could own slaves? We're not doing that anymore. He does the opposite. He says, I'm here to fulfill the law. Nothing will change. Not a jot or tittle of the law will change until all has been fulfilled. And then we have the phrase from the New Testament that says, slaves, obey your masters as you would obey Christ. So Old Testament says you can be a cruel sort of Quentin Tarantino-esque slave owner character. And the New Testament does nothing to say no. In fact, it has this one line that slave owners in our Civil War times used to read to slaves to say, even the New Testament, when Jesus was around, is telling you, obey your masters. How do you reconcile that with a good God? That's our question.
Yes, and I read everything that y'all read, and I have all those same questions. I've went through those questions, even pertaining to my marriage. I had, when I've lived in this marriage to where I performed the wife role and I was the homemaker and all that, I see that. I've struggled with those same things that you're talking about. But that's what I'm saying. I don't know how else to say it, but I think that we can define, it's just like fruit. We can define it
So
as
let's
oranges
stop
and apples
let's
that
stop
grows on the
using
tree,
analogies and
or-
tell me what you're defining. You've gone to this definition thing a bit, but we haven't gotten to the
But-
point. What definition are you proposing in our words that we're using to describe slavery being endorsed in the Bible? What definition are you calling into question?
Slavery? I don't think that God was talking about demeaning, chaining.
Will you be my
whipping,
slave? Will you be my slave under the rules of the Old Testament?
Why would you want me to be?
That's not the question. My question is, would you want to be my slave under the Old Testament rules for non-Hebrew slaves?
That's a good question, and I have to think about that.
I suggest you
I
do.
mean, really. I mean, seriously.
I can't hear you there. See,
would I want to be? I would not want to be your slave. Of course not. I mean, of course not. That's not a. But I'm saying I'm trying to see what you're wanting me to see.
I'm trying to say that that's what morality is about. Do unto others as you would do unto them. The golden rule. Like, don't own slaves because people who were slaves would not want to be slaves.
Well, so Vickie, do you understand?
Do unto others as you have them do unto you. I mean,
I'm comparing those two things, right? I'm comparing those two. Golden rule is found across religions and cultures, right? Many cultures have come up with that rule as an example of, hey, don't do something you wouldn't want done to you, or if everybody did it, it would be awful, or those sorts of rules. Just sort of shorthand bumper sticker logic for morality. And what I'm saying is, you just walked into that by thinking about it. All you did was think, and I congratulate you. No, I really wouldn't want to be a slave under the Old Testament rules. And then my conclusion is, well, neither did anybody else, right? Nobody wants to be a slave under the Old Testament rules. And yet the Bible says it is not only not horrible, here are the rules. Here's the how you do it. So I'm sorry, Godless Engineer was gonna come in. I'd love to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, so I get the feeling, Vickie, that you're trying to say that because God didn't say to treat slaves horribly or something like that, at least explicitly, that somehow it was a different kind of slavery. It was a better kind of slavery. And I just don't see that.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
No? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I thought that you were going that direction.
I don't believe in slavery.
You don't believe in slavery?
No, that's not what I'm saying. No, I'm saying that and it's just like when I go to a Christian board and I talk to Christians, I get the same thing from them telling me that it cannot be a different term. It cannot be a different type of slavery. It has to be, when you talk to them about certain words and say, let's look at these words, and it's just like physical healing and spiritual healing. And they don't want to talk about it. They want to talk about just what it promises them, and they see it as one thing. They see woman as one thing, they see slave as one thing, and that's the way it is. And that's what I'm saying, is that I feel like what I'm defending is that what if there's another definition, and is that not okay to say that maybe there is another definition?
Let's take that assumption. Let's go with that. Okay. So let's assume that there's a misunderstanding here, that there's a definition that's been lost in time. Even though just so we can agree on this, what the popular people in the pews think about interpretations of terms can be very different from the people who actually study these languages, who go in and look at translations of copies of transcripts that were passed down by oral tradition. They've gone and read everything that we have, the originals on the actual clay tablets or whatever. Okay, so those people inform our understanding, but let's ignore that and say that there is some sort of misunderstanding here. My question to you is, the story of the Bible is a story of possibly the most important question in all of human existence, the story of a potential afterlife, living as long as you want to, or living as long as God wants you to. and even Christians, I think, agree, it's the most important message ever. So if you've got a God character that is all powerful enough to have created this universe where the visible universe has 2 trillion billion galaxies, and each galaxy has 400 billion stars in it, and they did all of that, don't you think it's a little odd that the way they chose to convey this message to you, Vickie, is through misinterpretations of translations, of copies of translations, where we don't have any of the originals written down by anybody? They were all written by anonymous people well after the fact of Jesus's life. Is that the best way to convey the most important message in all of humanity, to the point where we could have a definitional misunderstanding about important terms?
I think about that every single day, because that's why I'm calling and I'm telling you that even though I may sound like, yeah, this is what I'm telling, I still doubt everything I'm saying myself, because what you just said and what I've heard from y'all, like, to be afraid that there is no God, that's scary. That's scary. Sure. And with me having hope, I tell my husband all the time, I get depressed. It's going to make me cry, because I really am scared, because the world, I don't feel like there's not a lot of stuff to be like hopeful and happy for. And I can't find, it's like I thought that was what I was finding in God. But then if there is no God, then I don't know what all this is even for. And I get your question that couldn't it, I mean, I think about that every day, that this is like a crap show. I don't even want to go listen to Christian or go to those sites. And that's why I ended up at y'all's, because I'm tired of hearing the same debate.
Let's hear from Godless on that.
Well, so I just want to, I understand that, you've been dedicated to God, like, a good portion of your life, and so it seems very scary, this whole proposition that maybe God doesn't exist. But also, when I left religion and I stopped believing in God, an entire world opened up for me, because, like, I was predicating a lot of my actions and everything like that on this whole idea that I was going to get to go to heaven, or I was going to have this afterlife and everything. Once that was taken away from me, I was able to really focus in on, like, everything that I have now, that I'm experiencing now, and really enjoying it, like, really appreciating it, because it's like, well, this is the only life that I have. This is the only experience I'm going to have. So, I need to be like, I want to be happy. I want to do things in my life that make me happy and that benefit other people and all this other stuff. So, like, I feel like, while it may seem scary now, this whole prospect of God not existing, I think that if you try to look at everything in your life without that lens of God on it, you'll see, like, how full of a life you actually have, and how important it is to, like, experience those things every day, and how the thing that makes this life have meaning are the experiences that you have. Like, that this is the only life that you're going to get. So, like, might as well make the best of it. And you don't need to worry about some misogynistic, God up there and everything. To touch back on the slavery and the definitions kind of thing, while there could be a chance that we're missing some kind of understanding from the Hebrew language about how they described slaves and all this other stuff, what we do know is how the slave trade existed in the areas around Israel in the ancient Near East. That's well documented. And the Israelites actually were either on par or just slightly worse than the surrounding ancient Near Eastern cultures. So when you're sitting there trying to figure out, well, what does God mean by slavery? What they meant at that time is going to be the same kind of slavery that every other person at that time, in that point in time in human history, meant by slavery. It was quite literally owning another person as property. Now, the ancient Near Eastern cultures, they had laws that either protected slaves or afforded slaves some kind of benefits. So that is still on par, like the Israelites' implementation of that is still on par with the ancient Near Eastern culture. So, I mean, slavery in any kind of sense where it's chattel slavery and not some ambiguous, like super weird, kind of definition. It's going to be owning another person as slave and deriving benefit from their hard labor where they do not derive any benefit from it directly.
Yeah.
And so that is how we define chattel slavery, and that's how we define biblical slavery. So if you believe that God in the New Testament is the same in the New Testament as he is in the Old Testament and as he is now in the present day and as he will be in the future, then God is directly responsible for some slave trade, or all of the slave trade really that was happening in Israel. Now, if you're not good with the slave trade, then I would say that you should probably not consider God good. If God is good, omnibenevolent and all that kind of good stuff, if he is that thing, then he should have definitely in the Old Testament said, hey, don't own people as slaves. But he didn't do that. So can you really consider him to be a good God if he's going to mandate things like sexual slavery, chattel slavery, genocide, all of these things? Can you imagine considering anybody a good person if they order you personally to go to the next town and slaughter everybody in it, including babies and small children?
Right. Yeah. Vickie, we've been on a while. I really, really, really like this call. But we do have to get on to other callers. I would suggest that you call back. I don't know when Godless is going to be on. I'll be on in about a month where we try to cycle through. But I really appreciate your honesty and you being vulnerable and talking about your troubles. We are right there with you. I've spoken to many callers who were on the same path as you. Some have, went and found something that convinced them to stay with Christianity. Many continued to say, hey, I need to be as skeptical about these claims as I do about the used car salesman, telling me the car is good. Like, I need to be skeptical. This is the most important thing. And I would continue to do that. I'm not going to try to say one way or the other. We're just sitting here telling you things that we think make it kind of obvious that this is made up stuff. So thank you very much for calling in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next. So bye-bye. That was a good call. That took a while, but I think that's a very common experience that people have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right. Well, I do have a few more announcements. We've got other calls. I'm going to try to get through them quickly. So let's go through those. The ACA wants you to know what is going on in our community. And for that, you can head to www.atheist-community.org, where you can learn about the organization itself, its policies, and how you can get involved. Also, if you would like what we do, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Giving to our Patreon ensures our ability to continue to produce the content that you love. You can visit tiny.cc/PatreonAXP. And finally, as we always do, we would like to thank the people without whom we could not put on this show, our crew. They put this show together every single week. We have video operators, audio operators. Hello, everybody. Note takers, call screeners, chat moderators. Thank you so much for making all of this still pretty amazing technological wonder that we can all be in different locations and put out this show. What not 20 years ago would have been a miracle. So thank you so much for doing that. We have received a few more super chats. So let's go through those real quickly. We've got Nero Mal, member for a year, $5. Happy Necromancy Day. Acolytes and authorized clerics are reminded that raise dead spells are to be assumed failed until independent verification. I feel like that's a person familiar not only with the gospel, but also Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not sure. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Pibblepunk, half dog, half canine, $5. Easter, the day we celebrate the time Jesus laid a bunch of eggs in the woods and made some rabbits go find them or something. I think he's confusing that with the little bunny foo-foo story, right? The good fairy knocked him on the head and...
Yeah, probably. But also, what I would say is that no, Jesus is the one that's forcing the rabbits to shit out the eggs, and then Jesus is hiding them. Okay, he's got an army of rabbits that are producing the eggs.
I think you need to write a pilot for this show. Get this produced. Right up there with Sharknado. Nero Mal, member for a year. Another Nero Mal, thank you, $5. Paul's words are worthless. An uneducated Gentile who knew close to nothing of the Jewish religion. He knew nothing about the Old Testament. I am ignorant as to those claims. What is your take on that, Godless Engineer? Was Paul an uneducated Gentile who did not know about the Old Testament?
No, I mean, he definitely knew about, like, he quotes the Old Testament. He harkens back to it. He says that he's the most learned Jew in, I believe that's Galatians 1. So, I mean, no, he definitely knows the Old Testament. That's where he derives his theology from.
Okay. All right. So there we go, Niramal. If you want to debate GE, you got to give us more money. Another super chat. Omar Quimbaya, new member. Thank you for joining. $5. I love hearing thoughts of genuine believers and why they believe. I agree. Vickie was a great call. It's hard to hear the gymnastics to justify slavery. Should it be an Olympic sport? That is mental gymnastics is a very common thing you hear there. I think it's a human condition. And what you're hearing is a brain trying to resolve cognitive dissonance. I want to believe, or I do believe, the Bible is a net good thing, or the character of God in the Bible is a good character. We point out slavery and female stonings and the genocide killing of women and children and bashing children on the rocks. And then we just ask the question, does that sound like a good person? And then you hear the brain going, I can't hold these two thoughts simultaneously. So I'm going to try to say, well, I'm going to be skeptical about the one that is my disfavored position, right? The one that I think I don't want. So I'm going to be skeptical about the definition of slavery. I'm going to be skeptical about the definition of rocks. Maybe rocks were meant mattresses back then, right? Who knows? So yes, that is trouble, but everybody's been through it. And if Vickie's still listening, you should recognize that in yourself. That uncomfortable feeling, right, is learning new information that contradicts older, previously held beliefs. How do you resolve that? The honest way is to go research, read, find out what the experts say, verify their research, and then come up with your new position. Niramal wrote back, Godless Engineer. Another Niramal, $5. Okay, nix slave. Look at how they, okay, this is about the slave. Nix the word slave. Look at how they treat non-Hebrew servants. Unacceptable either way. Refusing to say slave doesn't make it better. That's true. That's true. That's why I asked that question, and many people have. Would you be my slave? Would you be my servant under these rules? You know, you're a female, and I'm the owner. I get to have sex with you. I get to sell you to people, even if you don't want to go. If you have relatives that you care about, too bad. I'm shipping you off to California. I'm going to die, but I'm going to leave you in my will to my kids who are worse than me. That's whatever you call that, bad. And finally, I'm meaterator. Whatever that is, $5. I am E-Trader. Tell Vickie that she will know no better freedom than the freedom from religion. That is true. Freedom. I like to play on the word of freedom there from slavery. Freedom from religion is a good thing. And I guess that goes, Godless, to her last sentiment of, to sum it up, I'm questioning, but I'm afraid. Right. Is there nothing out there? Is life pointless? Did you ever have to deal with that?
I actually, no. I mean, like the whole meaning of life and everything like that really didn't come into question for me. I mean, I just believed because I was told to always believe, and I just believed things without critically thinking about them. And so,
Gotcha.
like, I guess I never attached meaning to, like, belief in God. Got it.
All right. I did not either. I last would have said, yes, I believe in a God, probably when I was 10 or 12, but never really thought about it. And as soon as I started thinking about it, it was like, okay, these stories are kind of crazy. And then I went through this period of, okay, I must be missing something. Like, I looked around and all these people, they take this so seriously. They're trying to pass laws based on this to infringe on people's rights. I must be missing something. There's a codex somewhere in the Bible I haven't read. So that's when I started reading the Bible. I'm like, nope, there's nothing here. It really is just fan fiction. I think that going with that super chat, yes, I agree that the freedom that you get when you realize I am not the puppet or toy of a divine dictator, and I get to go create the life I think I should live, and I'm free to do that, is a very liberating thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Next caller, we have Shabazz from Kentucky. No pronouns given. The question here is, what is it about your ideology that leads you to atheism? What is it about a creator that you find unbelievable? So before I put you on the air, Shabazz, I'm going to ask Godless two questions. Is atheism, in your mind, an ideology?
No, it's an answer to a question of whether or not you believe in God.
Okay. And I'm not saying that that's what Shabazz said. He said, what is it about your ideology that leads you to atheism? But I just wanted to clarify that point. And two, what is it about a creator that you find unbelievable? I'll take that one first by saying the creator's characters I've been presented with so far have either defied the laws of physics, there's no evidence for them, etc. So when you say unbelievable, I would ask you your definition of that, but I'm going to assume it's something like mine, which is I have not been presented with sufficient evidence to convince me that they're real. So given those two premises, Shabazz, I'm going to put you online. Given those, I would like to ask you to go ahead and give us your questions and tell us your thoughts.
You all laid the questions out pretty clearly, and it's not necessarily ideology that needed to be the term that I used. Just what is it in general that leads somebody towards atheism? And if you say it's that you just haven't seen sufficient proof, that's that question answered. And but my rebuttal to that, or my question to that answer, would be, what is it that would be sufficient proof to someone like you? I guess I couldn't say an atheist in general, but when an atheist such as yourself, what would be sufficient proof to you?
Right. Well, I don't have to know that. I don't have to know what would be sufficient proof or what would convince me. But if you're proposing a God definition where your God is all powerful and all knowledgeable, then he should definitely know what would convince me. So it's really not up to me to figure out what would be convincing. I can tell you right now, all of the evidence presented so far by theists are not convincing to me. That's what I can say for sure. If I were to try to formulate some kind of criteria, I would say that you'd have to provide some kind of verifiable suspension of the natural order of reality that has no underlying cause or reason for it, and the best explanation is not a natural one, but is rather a supernatural one. I think that would be a good first step in coming to an understanding of God. Do you have any kind of evidence that would meet that definition?
The Muslim will always tell you there's nothing about it that I can prove to you. All we can do is tell you why it is that we are in a state of belief, and you do it that way you will. So,
are you a Muslim?
Yes, I'm a Muslim.
Okay, so you're Muslim. That's fine. Well, so you're basically saying that there's no point in me asking you to give me evidence for your God. Like you're just supposed to sit there and point to the Quran and be like, the Quran says this, therefore believe it. Is that what I'm getting from you? I feel like that's what I'm getting from you.
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But
okay,
what
could you explain a little bit further?
I will tell you. Yeah, I will tell you that the Quran, to some degree, is evidence. Is part of why I'm a Muslim, but that's not part of why I believe in a higher power that I think created the universe in the first place. I believe in a higher power because I don't think
that the universe was created.
I'm sorry.
I don't think that the universe was created. If you're starting from a position where you're like, "Oh, the universe was created," then you're doing question begging.
Yeah, let's ask him that. What convinced you that the universe is a creation?
Well, it's exactly that. As I was just saying, I don't believe in luck, chance, or coincidence.
Okay.
And so I don't believe that anything, including and especially the entire universe, could have come about by luck, chance, or coincidence. And
Can you
I
define luck and chance and coincidence?
That's where I was going to go. Let's stick to that luck, chance, and coincidence. So what we're gonna ask you to do is define what you mean by coming about as of luck, chance, and coincidence. So, taking your words, I think what you're saying is that there's a dichotomy. Either the universe was intentionally created by an agent, a thinking mind created the universe, or the only other possibility is that it came about by what you call luck, chance, or coincidence. And what we're asking you is,
or it simply always existed,
or maybe it was eternal. Yeah, that's another option, right? So, what do you mean by luck, chance, and coincidence as with respect to, I guess, physics, and realizing none of us are physicists here? What do you mean by luck, chance, or coincidence? Because I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah. Well, that I would define, each of those terms by Webster's dictionary, but probably the same way that anybody else would define them. But when someone says a physicist or an atheist, for instance, says that that's how those are one of the three reasons that the universe could have come about. Stephen Hawking, I think his name is, the guy who's in a wheelchair. He says the universe exists simply because it can. Sure. and nothing deeper than that. Well, to me, that would be.
Do you know what he meant by that?
Chance, at least.
Do you know what Hawking meant by it exists because it can?
No.
And again, I'm not a physicist.
No, not if
my
he had a deeper meaning than just what he said. No. If he had a deeper meaning than just what he said outright, no, I don't understand what he meant by that.
Okay, so this is my novice understanding, and I'd love to hear from physicists who tell me that I've got it wrong. But I look to a couple of different things that we know experimentally happen that I think would fall under your definition by luck, chance, or coincidence. So are you familiar with radioactive decay?
Man, I've heard the terminology. I mean, I've never read anything about it. I don't have knowledge.
All right, so you've got a collection of atoms that are all the same type, and some of them are radioactive. They throw off particles over time, and they decay from one form of an element to a different element, right? Plutonium and those sorts of things are highly radioactive, and they have what's called a half-life, right? So we cannot predict when any given particle will be thrown out of an element, like when it will shed that electron or whatever particle it's shedding, right? But we know with a certainty that taken as a whole over time, that it will lose half of its volume over, let's say we're dealing with some form of uranium and it's got a half-life of 1,000 years. By definition, and these are just example numbers, but by definition, that means if you start with 100 grams of it, then in 100 years, because it's got a half-life, in 1,000 years, because it's got a half-life of 1,000 years, over 1,000 years, you will be down to 50 grams instead of 100. So while we cannot predict, it seems absolutely random when any given particle will be thrown off, we can be absolutely certain that when you measure that as a whole, by the time you get to 1,000 years, pretty much exactly half of that stuff will be gone. So that's one example of each individual thing is random, but over time it becomes a sure thing. Another example is we have now proven that at the quantum levels, particles are created and disappear apparently randomly, i.e. without a cause. Particles just blink into existence and then they blink out of existence. This has been observed in the laboratory. So when I think about the universe and when Stephen Hawking says it exists because it can, if you've got an infinite amount of time, not that time existed before the universe, but if you've got an infinite amount of potential to exist, then given enough opportunities to exist, i.e. given enough opportunities for that atom to decay, it's going to happen at some point. I think that's what he meant. So taking all of that information, the fact that we observe random things happening that appear to be uncaused, at least with the quantum stuff, particles appearing and disappearing in an on-case state, and the fact that we see random things happening, but then when you measure it at a higher level, it all becomes a sure thing. Doesn't that call into question your dichotomy that the universe was either created by a creator, always been, or just happened by quote unquote chance? Isn't chance in that context a viable option?
It doesn't to me. If I can explain.
Sure.
Well, the reason for that is because the example that you gave of the things appearing and disappearing seemingly without a cause. Well, I mean, of course, my argument against that would be that seemingly, and us not understanding what's going on there doesn't mean that there is no cause of it. It doesn't even mean that they are appearing and disappearing randomly. I mean, they're coming out of somewhere and going to somewhere that we are unaware of. Hell, in 10 years, we might know what's going on with that. Just like
That
maybe
is
10
an
years ago, we didn't even know
amazingly-
that.
That is an amazingly good argument. That is an amazingly good argument, right? I totally agree with you. The best answer we have right now as to why these things appear apparently randomly and disappear is we don't know, right? That's the answer. We don't know. Is that correct?
Yeah, I reckon.
Okay. So isn't that the same answer to where did the universe come from? The best answer is I don't know.
Well, I don't think. No, I don't think it's the same. I don't think it's the same answer because, for instance, well, one of the reasons that I believe in a creator in the first place is because we exist in a reality where I'm not familiar with things simply popping into existence out of nowhere or creating themselves or simply having always existed, and so that leaves me believing or thinking that I don't have any reason to believe that the universe simply popped into existence for no apparent reason or created itself or has simply always existed, because
So
we don't
what
have
reason-
those things in the
let's say-
reality
let's
that we
say-
exist in.
Understood. Let's say we agree with that. You just said, I have no good reason to believe that the universe just popped into existence, whatever that may be. Let's say we agree on that, hypothetically. Do you have a good reason to believe it was created by an agent, a thinking agent?
Well, I have what I believe to be a good reason, and
Okay,
I
what's
think
that?
I may have said that a little earlier, because I don't believe that because I like you take anything that is complex, which I'm sure you've heard.
Don't go to the dichotomy again. Don't go to the. Hold on. Don't. I want to warn you. I see where you're going with this. Godless. I know you know where he's going with this. I don't think you're applying the same level of intellectual honesty to your answer about where did the universe come from. Was it did it just pop into existence versus did it come from a mind? I would propose the answer is I don't know to both of them, because we have the equal amount of evidence for both of those propositions. I have never seen a universe be created by a person. I have never seen an agent demonstrate that they have capabilities even close to creating a universe. I have never seen anybody explain why quantum particles pop in and out of existence. So my answer to why does all of that happen is I don't know. So GE, that's on your screen right now. Godless. Before we get back to Shabazz, which I think, Shabazz, you're doing a great idea. You're doing great. I just wanted to sort of cut you off at the pass there. It sounds like you're saying you've got different levels of evidence demand or requirements, standards of evidence, as we call it in the courtroom. What are your thoughts there, GE, so far?
Well, so I'm wondering if so the natural explanation is just going to be that universes inflating from wherever they inflate from, whether that be a quantum scalar field or a singularity, however you want to describe that. It's going to be a natural process that happens, right? So considering that's a natural process, I usually like to shift to something that's a little bit easier for everybody to understand, because the beginning of the universe is a rather complex topic to talk about with a lot of different nuances and facets to it. I usually like to shift to the water cycle. And I'm wondering if Shabazz can tell me, do you think that God is needed or responsible for the water cycle to operate?
Yes, I think Allah is responsible for everything in creation. So, quite naturally, I would think that.
So you would think that God, every time it rains, God is directly involved in that weather event.
Anything that happens in nature, I think Allah is directly not directly involved in, but in control.
No, Shabazz, you say a law is responsible for it, right? A law is something that's written by humans. It's our description of how reality works, and it definitely does not include a God-like coefficient or anything in it. So what I'm asking you directly is,
I didn't say a law. I said Allah. I said I think Allah is in
I'm
control
so
of
sorry.
not. Yeah,
My ears, sorry, Allah. I got you now. My ears was hearing a law.
I was with you,
Allah.
Godless. I'm like, I'm confused. But okay.
Well, when I say Allah on my voice text, it says Allah, so it probably really does sound like I'm saying that sometimes. So excuse me.
No, I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah.
All right. So God, let's say God as a shortcut for some powerful being. God is directly involved with making it rain on Tuesday.
Right. What gives you the indication that God is directly, or Allah is directly involved in making it rain? Like how we understand the water cycle to operate, it's all about a transfer of energy. Energy comes from the sun. It heats up a puddle of water. That puddle of water turns into water vapor because of the energy that it absorbs, and it gets excited, like with all the energy that it's absorbed, and it turns into water vapor. It then rises up into the air, making clouds. Once those clouds get to a certain temperature that's lower than in energy level than what it was when it originally turned into water vapor, it then turns into some kind of precipitation. Now, depending on how much energy those water molecules lose, it turns into rain, sleet, snow, hail, whatever, right? And so it falls to the ground, and then it returns to a liquid state, either like if it was like sleet or snow or something like that, it's gained enough energy to turn into water. But eventually you're going to get back around to another transfer of energy from the sun to the puddle of water that then starts it all up again. So in this exchange and transfer of and transformation of energy, where is God in that equation?
Man, to me, the answer is as simple as any cycle that is produced by anything that man creates. I mean, that's how Allah meant for it to be. That's that's how He said it to be. I don't understand.
Okay,
so are you a? Let me ask you a question there real quickly. Are you a deist, i.e., Allah set the universe in motion like a clockwork toy, but then once it was running, He doesn't interfere?
No, well, Muslims think that Allah is always in control and mindful of His creation.
But you can't point to a spot in the cycle. You can't point to a spot in the water cycle where God is doing anything to make it rain on Tuesday at tea time.
I can't. Yeah, well, of course I can't point to that. I can't point that out to you no more than I can point out to you anything that we can't verify ourselves about what Quran says. But my friend, once you already believe on Quran, the things in there that are because of the things in there that are verifiable, the things in there that you can't verify.
Right, Shabazz.
Can I finish that thought?
Well, no. So basically what I'm hearing from you is that you have to already believe in Allah in order to understand the explanation for why Allah makes rain happen. And that explanation is basically just an ad hoc stipulation that Allah is needed for the rain to occur.
That's not what I'm saying, though.
Oh, I'm sorry. It sounded exactly.
That's what I heard as well. So why don't you explain it to us? How is it? Let's cut to the chase. Actually, rather than worrying about quantum physics and water cycles, what is the best piece of evidence that you were presented with that convinced you that there was a God? Let's not even talk about that it was Allah. What's the single best piece of evidence that you became aware of that convinced you that there was a God?
That's great. Yeah, that absolutely. Because my belief in Islam versus my belief in a creator are two totally different things. And it's not that there was any evidence presented to me. It's just what my natural mind tells me. It's what the Muslims call the fitra, our natural inclination. Because I even tried atheism out once upon a time. I was 14 years old, found myself in a ridiculous situation, terribly situation again for the umpteenth time. Couldn't believe it. Decided I didn't believe in God anymore because I kept finding myself in situations like that. That lasted for a couple of days before my not believing before something happened that. My not believing in luck, chance, and coincidence kicked in, and I've never been able to get back to that state of mind again.
So
I believe in a higher power.
let's answer the question though. What is the single best piece of evidence that you were presented with that convinced you there was a God?
Yeah, but my friend, I answered that. I said no one presented me with any evidence. It's my natural inclination. I can't convince myself, you know, that there's no creator of trees and grass and everything that I see.
I understand. Hold on a second. Hold on. I get it. You told me the answer. So my follow-up is that a good reason to believe something?
It's not in itself. I wouldn't say your natural inclination is a reason to believe something. No, not in itself, because your natural inclination could be incorrect.
Okay. Well, so you agree that you could be incorrect. Your natural inclination that Allah exists and controls everything, that can be incorrect.
It's not only do I agree that I could be incorrect about that, but of course, it's not just that one reason that I believe in it. I acknowledge that every reason that I believe in Allah, Islam, and Al-Quran, I acknowledge that every bit of that could be incorrect.
Okay. That's great.
I don't think that it is incorrect, but I acknowledge that it could be.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Why don't you require evidence to believe in things about reality? Because it seems like you're saying that you believe in Allah and you don't have evidence, you just believe in it. Am I misunderstanding that?
No, I don't feel like I don't have evidence. My evidence is the main evidence that Allah is the creator, of course, to the Muslim is Quran. And my evidence to myself that there's a say what?
Oh no! Let's hold on. I'm gonna call back. I'm gonna call back to the very beginning. I'm gonna call back to the very beginning of our call here. I literally said your evidence that Allah exists is you point at the Quran is like, look, there's the Quran that says Allah exists. Therefore, Allah exists. That's exactly exactly what you just said. Am I losing my mind?
When you said that
no,
to me,
I don't think so. At the time that you observed that, I wanted to get into a conversation about circular arguments and things like that, but we have come full circle to the circular argument. So let's give Shabazz a chance to clarify. I want to give you a chance to clarify. So explain to us how this is not circular reasoning. If I've understood you correctly, let me summarize, because one thing I found on these calls is people can run with something and not understand each other. So let me summarize my understanding of your position to make sure I've got it right. The best reason you have for believing in a God is your natural inclination. You then say that another good reason, maybe not the best, but a good reason to get specific on Allah or whatever, is the existence of the Quran and what it says. Am I understanding that correctly?
Just about. Yes, it's my natural inclination that has me believing in a higher power at all. And the reason that I believe that higher power is actually Allah is because I've been convinced by what Quran says.
Okay, what about the Quran? Why should we believe anything that's written in the Quran? What about it makes it convincing?
Well, there are a few things. One thing is the Quran has falsification tests, and I don't see that in any other religious book, especially when I was a Christian studying going through Christianity. The main one is it says, and if you are in doubt about what we have revealed from time to time to our servant the prophet, then produce a surah like one in Quran and call your witnesses or helpers if there are any besides Allah.
Okay.
And then it goes on later on to say,
no, Shabazz.
Yeah, and then it goes on.
Tell me right now.
Yeah, man. Can I finish my?
No. Let's address that one. We've gone back and forth. I was trying to clarify your position. We've given you time to talk. Let us address it one by one, because if we get 20 of them in a row and we have to go back to the first one, everybody's going to forget about it. So let's go with this one. Go ahead, Godless. If I understand correctly, it's, hey, if you think this is wrong, produce your own evidence. Am I understanding that correctly?
No.
No. Okay.
You don't think that No, it's not if you think it's wrong, produce your own evidence. If you don't think this book is from the creator of the universe,
right,
then first it says produce a chapter like it, where some of the chapters are only a few verses. And then later on it goes on to say, just go ahead and produce a verse like it. And that challenge has been running for 1,450 years. Some people have stepped up to the plate, but it sure hasn't been.
What does it mean? I'm sorry, Godless. You go first. We've got a lot of questions here. That's I don't think I've heard that one. I think I've heard it in popular culture, but that's an interesting one to think about. What you go ahead, Godless.
Well, so I would say, like, so the Quran states. Let me ask you this thing first, there, Shabazz. When you look out at the night sky, do you see one moon or one moon split in two?
Clearly, I see one moon.
Okay, fine. The Quran is false in what it claims, and God is not the all-knowing creator of the universe, because I've proven that the verse in the Quran, which I can look up the exact verse if you want me to, where it says that the moon got split in two. I mean, if the moon is not split in two, how does that make sense? Or are you going to try to retcon that verse into it not literally being about that?
Yeah, no, it literally meant that the moon was split in two. And I mean, man, my dude, please, the moon being split in two doesn't mean that it still has to be split in two. Allah created the moon in the first place. I think if he wanted to split it in two and put it back together so it wasn't notable, I think he would be able to do that, considering.
Just to clarify, the splitting was notable, but the mending doesn't have a mention. Is that correct? Like, that's not notable?
No.
Oh, okay. That's convenient.
Because it's obvious that it was mended if it's not still split. Isn't it obvious?
Of course it's obvious. To anyone who accepts that it was split, to anyone who accepts that it's split, it must have been mended. I congratulate you on that logic. If we accept that it was split in the past and it's not split anymore, then it must have been mended. You are 100% accurate on that. But Godless, do we have any evidence that the moon was ever split other than some person writing a book about something?
No, definitely not. But also, I love how this is giving, like, my girlfriend lives in another high or goes to another high school, another school, because basically what you're telling me is that, oh, look, the Quran says that the moon got split into two halves. Oh, but it's not split into two halves now, so it got put back together by God. Obviously there's no seam or anything like that we've been able to discover whenever we've went to the moon or anything like that. So, like, he split it and then perfectly put it back together so that we cannot fucking tell that it was ever split. But also, it's notable to mention that no other civilization in the history of the world has noted that the moon split into two and then was miraculously put the fucketh back together.
That by Shabazz's logic, that means obviously that meant Allah hid that event from everybody else.
No, that's not obviously by my logic. That's what you are saying is obviously by my logic.
But that is your logic. Your logic says if a book claims a thing, I'm going to mute you because I want to explain that. Because logic is what we're sorely lacking here. Your logic for the last response was, if this book says something happened and now we observe something that appears to contradict that, then we must believe the book and come up with some other explanation as to why we don't observe that. And then Godless just said, well, the book says that the moon split within recorded history. No other population on Earth recorded seeing a split moon. Using your logic, a book said a thing. We have evidence that contradicts that thing. Therefore, some other explanation must be come up with. We must invent some other explanation to still believe in this book, i.e., God hid it from the rest of the world, or they're lying about it, right? They're lying. So that's what I mean by that. So, do you understand that's the same reasoning?
No, it's not the same reasoning at all. And the only reason it even seems like that is because, for starters, man, you already looking for something wrong with what I'm saying. So just like y'all telling me when I'm starting out from a certain position, I'm going to automatically see things from that position. So wait.
I got a bridge to sell you, man. Like, if it's not your job to be skeptical of claims, especially crazy claims, like, I got a bridge to sell you, I got this $1 million Bitcoin investment you should make, You should be freaking looking for things that are wrong. Hey, I can cure your daughter's cancer, right? Give me $1 billion. I'll do that. Shouldn't you? Isn't it your job as a thinking human being to be skeptical about these things? Aren't we in a place in this whole goddamn point in history where we're seeing things happen that are a result of people not being skeptical? We are harming ourselves. We're harming the world. We're doing all of this crazy stuff because people are not looking for contradictory evidence. They're not looking for alternative hypotheses. They're not actively trying to disprove the claims of certain people. So shouldn't you be looking for problems before you believe something? That's my question to you. What are your thoughts on that?
No, man, my thoughts are, man, I really don't appreciate how long I have to listen to you all critique and criticize. And then when I
Okay, so we're going to put him on mute again, because anytime anybody says that, I'm going to say, go get your own show. But you literally just said the problem with our reasoning is we're looking for problems with your reasoning. You called into a show where the main question we ask every freaking week is, what do you believe? And, comma, more importantly, comma, why? We want to know why you believe things, and then we are going to try to poke holes in that. That is how all of science works. That is how all of common day life works. When the guy comes to you and is selling you something that sounds too good to be true and has zero evidence, if a guy came to you and says, hey, you give me $10,000 today, at the end of the year, I'll give you $1 million. Trust me, this book says it's true. You wouldn't do it. And yet you're risking your eternal life on the same level of evidence. So I think, Godless, what is your take on this? Thank you, Shabazz. We'll go ahead and end the call now.
Yeah, I think that it's rather hilarious that people call in and they expect to be able to monologue. Like, I get that. I get that you have a response, and we definitely want to respond to you and your thoughts. But it's like, one, just doing a gish gallop and just monologuing for however long you want to monologue so that you can monopolize the time here on the show is not productive, and it's not interesting. And I just don't understand why people think that they can just call on here and monologue the entire time. It's really crazy. Second of all, I feel like what we're able to show with Shabazz's view of Allah and all that is that he's got a very special pleading attitude about it. He relies on his intuitions that there is a God, and then he was convinced by the Quran, and then all he has to do to other people is point to the Quran, and somehow the Quran can be disproven if you can write a line that's similar to the Quran.
Yeah. Like, we didn't get to that. I wanted him to define or whatever the Quran says, like, is there a definition for that? Like those exact words? Is it something that's poetic? Like, I'm sure people disagree, but that I found fascinating. It's like, I've read a lot of really good books that inspired me to tears. Like, I don't know.
Well, and I mean, like, I don't know the textual history of the Quran, but I'm guessing that it all wasn't written in one sitting. So you definitely have multiple different authors that are writing in similar styles, and you could definitely write in a similar style to the Quran. Like, I mean, you could train. I mean, in the age of AI that we're going through right now, you could definitely train AI to sound exactly like the Quran and have it produce new verses to the Quran, and I doubt you'd be able to pick them out.
That's an amazing point. Oh my God, I hadn't even thought about that. That would be incredible. So, it smells of something I've seen a lot, and I don't know if this is unique to Muslim apologetics. Let me know if you've experienced this or if other people have experienced this in other religions. There's something unique about Muslim apologetics where they will get up and they will make these claims and then not even try to address the obvious sort of holes in it. Like a lot of Christian apologetics, they've learned to abstract out so they can have arguments about, whatever transcendental argument from whatever they want. But the claim, like, try to write something like the Quran, you can't. Right. And then they just say that, like, that wins the point. And then when you try to get into a conversation like it, you get the claims he said, which is it's been tried for 1,000 years or whatever he said, 900 years, and nobody's been able to do it. Right. And then when you peel that banana and when you pull that thread on that sweater, it's really just a collection of people making that claim, and there's no evidence that what they mean to say it was like the Quran. They don't ever define that. And then when you see people doing a very, very good job, it's discounted for some reason, right? It's just this false test that people are putting up. There's something special about that. The same thing where they get into a lot of Muslim apologetics is like, oh, the Quran predicted embryology. And then you actually look at embryology and it's just empty. It's like, it's nothing. It's like, oh, there's water involved in life or something is the biggest claim. And they just take it so far and people just believe it without question. And then they call our show and say, the problem with you guys is that you're trying to find problems with my beliefs. Oh, all right. So thank you for the call, Shabazz. It started off really well. I think the minute you say, hey, I'm sick of listening to you guys, then you can call into a different show, things like that. I do have another caller that's talking to you directly, Godless, and I want you to be prepared here. This is RJ, him from Colorado, said, I wanted to offer a correction to what Godless Engineer said on a previous show. So now we're going to have to hear the previous show about the Midianite female slave. So it's somewhat related. So I'm going to put RJ on him. RJ, what do you think that Godless claimed? Let's just stick with that. And then Godless can confirm he said that. And then if we agree on that, we can then hear your correction. So what do you think Godless said?
Okay. This was January 7th. He was on a caller with Justin, I believe, with a different caller. It wasn't me that called in, just so you know. Mm-hmm. So there's two corrections. One is he said that they were underage women.
Okay, so that's first. One, let's stick with the claims first rather than the corrections. One, Godless Engineer said that Midianite female slaves were underage. That's the first thing you want to correct. Second, what was your second misstatement?
His misstatement was that they could basically just rape these girls, that they didn't have to marry them.
Okay, so second claim. We'll get to the corrections. I want to make sure that Godless Engineer agrees with his positions here, with what you say he said. So second claim is for Midianite female slaves, somebody, assumingly their owner, could have sex without consent for them and did not have to marry them. Those are the two statements. GE, does he have you right? Is that what you said?
Underage was okay.
Underage and raping female slaves without marrying them. So, Godless Engineer, what's your position on those?
Right. Yeah. So, yes, I said both of those things, and I can explain them. Okay. So let's start with underage girls. And I want to go through this step by step because I don't want to gish gallop you or just throw a whole bunch of stuff your direction there, RJ. So let's start with underage girls. What Numbers 31 says, and I've actually got it pulled up right here so that I can read directly from it. Although it is the NIV version, I don't have time to go through and pull the one that I normally do. But so the NIV says, now kill all of the boys and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save for yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. So, I mean, at that time, if you're a girl and you're not married and you have not slept with a man yet, you're typically going to be post-pubescent, like just coming out of puberty. And that happens between, 10, I'd say between 10 and 14 years old. So we're talking about a wide range of girls at this point in time that would be considered children between 10 and let's say 17, 18 years old. Normally in these societies at this time, in Israelite society especially, as well as a general thing in the ancient Near Eastern culture, is that girls would be married as soon as they could. Right? They would be married off. They'd be sold off by their fathers to men that were around 20 to 30 years old. And because of this fact, that's why why I say that they were underage girls. They were they had just entered or just came out of puberty, or even before puberty. So it was all range of girls, as long as they have not known a man, which would limit the age to under 20, I would say. And so what we're looking at is, while maybe a small segment of them were not underage, a good portion of them would be underage. So do you want to respond to that?
RJ?
Yeah. Okay. So the NIV, I think you said you're reading out NIV, it's a bad translation. It's kind of sloppy.
Oh, okay, good. No, that's fine. That's fine. I'll look it up. I'll read it from the NRSVUE, I believe. NRSVUE version. Let me hold on. Since you have a problem with NIV, that's perfectly fine. That
James
does have its flaws. So,
James.
huh?
He wants the King
Why
James.
King James?
He wants
That's
the
a
King
shitty-
James one. That's like one of the worst
That's
ones.
a shitty fucking right. The King. So first of all, there, RJ, King James is a really shitty version to read from. Two, the NRSVUE, which is the updated addition to the NRSV version of it, is actually trying to faithfully translate from the original language into modern English, and so that's actually a better translation. I'd suggest you actually read that one. But let's we'll go to the KJV, King James version. There we go. It's not going to be any fucking better. Hold on, I'm not done yet. Let me read. Since you have a problem with it, I want to be able to provide you with a good one. Okay. So now, therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman that hath known man by lying with him. But all of the women children. Let me repeat this really loud so that you can hear the words that are used. But all of the women children that have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. Why? Let me ask you this, there, RJ.
Does it say to have sex with them? Does it say to have sex with them?
Why
do you think it means? What do you think it means, RJ? Tell us what you think that means.
Okay, hold on. Hey, let me respond. You guys, let me respond.
I just asked you a question. Respond. Don't prologue. Don't prologue. Don't soliloquy. I asked you, what do you think about that? And your first words out of your mouth was, "Let me respond." Okay, go.
Yeah, that's right. First Corinthians 7:3-6.
Wait, whoa. Wait a second. No. The question was, you objected to the age definition, you objected to the fact of why were the men keeping the child girls and women, quote unquote, for themselves. Right. So my question is, what do you think that was for?
Servants. That is a servant.
Okay. Let me ask this. Right. Let me hold on. Okay,
so Godless is going to assume that's true. Go ahead, Godless.
I haven't even given my rebuttal. I haven't even stated my case, and you're already coming out at me.
You said servants. You think that they are not going to have sex with them because they are being kept for servants, right? Right.
Right.
Okay, that's all we need right now. You will have a chance to talk in a minute. I assume Godless has another point to make that I'd like to address his point before we go through the motions of having you cite some other book, because he's got a point to make, and then we'll come back to you if there's a debate as to whether or not the usage of the idea of servants is legit or not. So Godless, how do you respond to that this was the purpose of keeping young girls and women who have not had sex with anybody else only as servants? Go ahead, Godless.
Okay, so if that were the case, then why would they specifically only want to keep the girls who have not had sex yet, the virgin girls? Why would they put such a heavy emphasis on the virginity of the girls, as far if it wasn't for sexual purposes? Number one. Number two, if that were the case for servants, why would they kill the small boys and other boys boys that were there that could also be used as servants? But also, why does the virginity preclude other women from being servants? If they're just going to be used as servants in a slave capacity, then it kind of seems moot to say, oh, don't take the non-virgin women. They can't be servants for whatever fucking reason because they've touched a dick. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But if you go to Numbers 20,
wait. We promised RJ he could
Right.
respond. So RJ, so what we have so far, just to summarize it, RJ, I'm going to summarize and let you speak.
Right.
Okay, pretend this is a courtroom. If a judge monologues and then it's my turn to speak, I don't sit there and complain that the judge monologued. I start speaking because it's my chance to make my case. All right. And it makes me look foolish to sit there and complain when somebody just said, please give your case. So here we go. You said the girls would not be used for sex. They would just be servants. Godless then said, okay, so why is the delineation of who can be kept as a servant amongst these prisoners only virgins? How do you respond to that?
Okay, because male servants can grow up and they're more powerful than female servants, and they can rise up against the tribe of Israel versus a female servant. As female servant,
That wasn't the question. I'm not interrupting. I just want to redirect.
Israel.
That's not the question, though. The question was not as between the boys and the girls. That was a second question. The first question was, what's the difference between the virgin and non-virgin girls? That's the important question. What's the difference there?
Because the non-virgin women usually have children, usually have had children.
That's not what they said.
So
They didn't say take only the non-mothers. So
Right.
why did
But
they
even
say
if even
virgin?
if they were not, it's an impure. So if they were not virgins, then they're impure according to the laws of
impure for what purpose? Impure for what purpose?
because if you
For carrying my hay.
slept with a woman.
If a woman's impure, does that prevent her from washing fucking dishes?
You guys don't understand. And then they use the servants to clean the temple too. The servants in the temple had.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There were
All right.
certain virgins too.
Okay.
There were
Okay.
32
So
of them. that
this
were
is-
to the temple.
Understood. So here's what's going on in my mind. Okay. I need you to understand,
I haven't even
RJ,
stated
that
my case.
you have stated enough of a case at this point, if this is your best answers. All right. Again, when you're in trial and they say guilty, you don't go, wait, I had more. You present your case. All right. So I'm going to mute you and give you some information and let you reflect upon this. What this sounds like to us is you make a claim, hey, this wasn't about sex. We point out a few things that seem to call that into serious question. And then you engage in sort of what I call just so stories. If you're familiar with Rudyard Kipling, who explains how the giraffe got a long neck and how the snake is long and slippery. There are these stories that are obviously concocted to create a set of rules under which this conclusion could exist, right? So that's what it sounds like you're coming up with. Like, well, they didn't say don't take mothers as servants because they said virgins. And so virgin, not being a virgin often leads to motherhood. So they just said virgin anyway. Let's ignore the fact that that's inaccurate and would cause a lot of categorical problems that God has to answer for. But then we say, okay, well, what does purity, when you brought that up, have to do with being a servant? Oh, well, sometimes they would clean the temples. A, I don't know about that. But B, even if they did, then you use the unpure girls for other things, right? So you're creating these just so stories that smell to me like rationalization. So I'd love to hear and I'm just being honest with you of how it sounds to me. Why should it sound any different to me? Go ahead, RJ.
So you put me on mute that entire time. But
yes, I said I was putting on you mute, and if you just now realized it, I mean, you were talking the whole time, or what?
Yeah, I was actually.
Okay, all right.
But
obviously, you're not interested in listening. So have a good day. We're going to go ahead and drop that call. We get this all the time, Godless. We get a call where here's how conversations work on this show, right? You come in and you make your case. You make a claim. I was very careful at the beginning of the call. I said, you state what the claims are. We'll have Godless agree whether or not he said that, and then we'll hear what you say. And I think, like you said earlier, people want a monologue. They want to say a bunch of stuff. And you start going down these paths. The first words out of your mouth weren't even about the chapter and verse that we were talking about. We had to reel you in there. And then we ask about why use the word virgin if it doesn't matter. Oh, well, it does matter because of motherhood. Oh, and then we address that. Well, it does matter because some girls might clean the temple. This is just making up shit to justify this obviously barbaric story. I can't think of another explanation for it. How about you, Godless?
No, I can't think of an explanation. Like the fact that he just kept talking is just.
I know. I'm glad you admitted it. Like I said, I'm going to put you on mute. I'm going to tell you what it sounds like to us and then ask you to respond. And we come back and you didn't hear a damn word we said. That speaks a lot. So thank you for your call. So, call back if you get a better sort of, again, you know, you're calling into a show where we have limited time, limited calls. I want my callers to be ready to make your case. Again, I'll use the courtroom analogy. I don't get to go in and represent a client. And then when it's my turn to speak, give anything other than my best evidence, my best argument, all of my arguments and things like that. So I try on this show to break them down one by one. I will let you make your claim. I will react to it. Yes, oftentimes we will speak more than the caller because you are giving us an idea and we are expanding upon it and reacting to it and explaining something. It's easy to make the claim. It's hard to go in and rebut it, expand upon it, and all that stuff. But then I will always go back to you and say, what do you think about that? Is there anything wrong with that? And that's your chance then to say, oh, well, here, and here. And if you're not very good at being succinct and coming to the point and saying, well, here are the three things I find wrong with it, A, B, and C, and then we can continue with a conversation. Maybe a call-in show is not the best spot for you, but it sounds like you've called in before. Spoke to Godless.
Yeah, and so with this, I did want to address the whole rape allegation because he did have.
Yes. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, just in case he's listening and he wants to call in another time and try to learn how to listen. So basically, if you, I get this from Dr. Jennifer R. Bird. She's got a great book on marriage in the Bible, and it's a very fascinating sort of read there because what we find out from the actual verbiage that's used, like the words that are used, is that there was no like modern concept of marriage. So when we talk about these girls getting married, we're not talking about the kind of marriage that occurs today. What we're talking about is forced sexual contact, and they're basically forced into a marriage through sex. And so the women did not have like the ability to choose. Like they didn't have bodily autonomy at this time, right? And so because they didn't have the bodily autonomy and the ability to choose all of this stuff, any of the marriages or anything like that in the Old Testament is going to be rape because it's a forced marriage. And as we've seen with, I forget the scholar's name, but he wrote a commentary on the Roman society. Forced marriage is a form of rape. It's a controlling one's ability to control their own sexual encounters and their sexual lives. And so because of that fact, it's considered rape. So if somebody else wants to argue with me on it, let's try not to get too gross about it. But in my experience, people normally get really gross about it.
Yeah, they do. I've gotten lots of calls about this. And not only is it forced marriage, but you keep in mind who's forcing it. This was oftentimes, if my understanding is correct, a financial transaction, right? I've got a daughter to sell. You give me a dowry. This is where dowries come from, right? You give me money to take my daughter off my hands. And the ceremony or the event will be a marriage where you will consummate it right then and there. In fact, there's rules in the Bible that say, hey, if you get married, you have the girl, and the man comes out and says, hey, this woman wasn't a virgin because she didn't spill blood upon the bed sheet, and the elders bring, or the parents or the family brings the bed sheet out to the family or to the town and proves that, yep, she didn't bleed. She's put to death, right? She's put to death. The guy, if he lies and says he wasn't a virgin, and he gets married and has sex, he gets a fine. Okay, this is what your Bible says. So how in hell is that fair? And keep in mind, this is something that I think it was Justin pointed out the last time on the show. We now know through study that only something like 40% of women bleed the first time they have sex. So if you combine all of this, you've got a book. Let's ignore the whole, hey, by the way, there's this term that's vague about keep the virgin women for yourselves. How the hell do we know that means? Let's ignore that and just say, okay, let's go to the actual laws. The laws say we're going to murder a bunch of innocent women because they didn't bleed on their wedding night because they are property that must be pure, like you said. And the fact that you brought up the whole purity thing is very scary too. So thank you, Godless. I know time is short for you, Godless. We do have a few more calls. We also have Ben on backup. Are you hanging around for one more call, or do you have to go?
Yeah, I've got one more call. I think that we could probably take that next call in queue, and that'll probably round it out for me.
Yeah, I think so. Are you talking about Jeff?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff, I was eyeing that call too. So Jeff from North Carolina, pronouns he, him. Jeff, your caller note says the message of slavery in the Old Testament is being misunderstood. So we've already talked a little bit about this. So what is, in your understanding, the true message of slavery in the Bible? Go ahead, Jeff.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, can hear you, Jeff. Go ahead.
Okay. What has to be understood is this. Moses was an Egyptian. He was raised in the house of Pharaoh for 40 years. And we all know that the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, he would be the I guess the general lawmaker of the whole territory. He was Pharaoh.
Okay.
So
I'll let you keep going, but I'm not sure we're on point here, but go ahead.
Oh, I know. I'm sure. It's hard to convey this message, but Moses was raised in his house for 40 years. So for 40 years, he was under, the influence of Egypt. So of course he would know all the laws of Egypt, correct?
Let me jump to Chase. I just want to make sure I understand you. Are you going to say that Moses used the laws of Egypt when he wrote the laws of the Old Testament? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the laws of the Old Testament are not from God and not divinely inspired?
Not at all. It is, but it
that's an interesting take. I've never heard that one before.
They are symbolic. And what's really going on in this world is what the whole of Scripture is about is Christ coming in the first century and reconciling man to God and showing them that this God of the Old Testament was not a true God. It was a God they had formulated.
Wow.
It was a God, Yahweh, that they had formulated to encourage their evil deeds, their geographical conquests, actually what's going on. And that's what all the New Testament is about, is fleeing Judaism, religion, because it was a hideous religion.
Wow.
That's what we have is actually, you guys don't realize it, but you're the Christians.
Who's the Christians?
And the religionists, you guys are.
Okay, so we're obviously using two different definitions of Christian. The definition of Christian I use is somebody who believes that Christ is either God or the Son of God, that there are supernatural claims in the Bible and that they are true. Is that what you mean?
Christ was a man. Christ was a man.
So the supernatural claims in the New Testament are also not true. Is that correct, according to you?
What do you mean when you say
supernatural claims? The stuff that today we would think are crazy, that he went to heaven and he's living eternally, that he turned water into wine, he walked on water, he resurrected people. These are all supernatural claims. All the things, today is Easter. He himself was resurrected. Like, did all of that happen in your belief system, or is that all just allegory?
It's all allegory.
Okay, so that's interesting. Do you believe in any supernatural claims?
Do I believe in any supernatural claims?
Yeah, like, is there something you would call a god?
Oh, absolutely, there's a God. He's a spirit.
Okay. So you're not a Christian. You believe that Judaism was evil and that there is a spirit God. What evidence do you have that there is a spirit God?
The fact that you and I are having this conversation right now.
Okay, Godless, you want to ask some questions? You look very confused.
Yeah, I am confused because he talked about how the New Testament was fulfillment of Scripture to refute the Jewish religion. And so I specifically brought up Matthew 5:18 that says, "For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not even not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished." So, like, I guess I don't understand if you're saying that the Old Testament is a bunch of lies and everything like that made up to do something or another by an evil God, then why does Jesus in the New Testament reaffirm the Old Testament laws?
Well, let me get I think if I get this. I think what you're saying, Jeff, is the Old Testament is just false. The New Testament is allegory. None of it relates to God at all. Your God is separate from the Holy Bible altogether. Is that correct?
It allegorically relates to him.
Okay, but it's not like
Adam.
The God of the Bible, the literal God of the Bible, that character is not what you believe in. You believe in something else. Presumptively, you don't believe in a literal Garden of Eden, a literal resurrection of Jesus, a literal miracles that are performed on his behalf. Correct?
I do, but at the same time, they're allegorical. This is the fact that
they're either true or they're allegories. It can't be both.
Well, an allegory can't be true.
If it's true, then it's true. It can also serve as a demonstration of something, but you wouldn't call it an allegory. An allegory is a story, a made-up story you tell somebody to teach some other lesson, right? I wouldn't call E = MC squared an allegory.
He's not listening to us.
Hold on. Is his name Cross-Examiner? Was he the one that asked the question?
Yeah,
about heaven.
That's me.
Passing away. Okay, here's my answer. According to Paul, heaven and earth did pass away.
And we should listen to Paul. Why?
Things in Corinthians.
Why should we listen to Paul?
Listen. Okay, here's where the allegory becomes the truth. Because heaven and earth is a reference to us, because that's what we're made of.
Why should we listen to Paul, though? That's the claim. Why should we believe the claim? What evidence do you have that any of what you're saying is actually true?
Because he's just like you. He saw.
That's a claim. That is not evidence.
But
evidence is something you can point to, a test you've run, some testimony from people, even though it's not great. You try to pile up the evidence before you accept something is true. I went and bought a car because of the tariffs. I shopped around. I went and read reviews on which car was the best car. I went and talked with salesmen. I negotiated. I then looked at the VIN number on the model I was buying to make sure this was the model I had negotiated with online and made sure it had all the features. I gathered evidence with my eyes and my ears and through testimony and through documentation. Okay. Do you have any of that shows that your God is real?
Sure. The book of Philip.
What's your best evidence? Your single best piece of evidence that your God is real and we should listen to Paul?
The book of Philemon.
The book of Philemon. I'm not familiar with that one. Are you, Godless?
Well, Philemon.
Philemon.
Right.
Okay, what is that? I'm ignorant. What is that?
Book of Philemon. Well, it's a book where this man that's in the church, the body of Christ, in that century, in that era, that age, he has a slave that runs away, and he does something that's not really, it's not fully told in the book what he does. But when he runs away from his master, Philemon, this man, Onesimus, in Rome, with Paul, like in prison. And Paul sends him back to Philemon with a letter. And Philemon is advocating Paul is advocating to Philemon to release this slave and receive him as a brother. And that's the evidence. It's the Spirit of God.
It's not. No, hold on.
Slavery.
Hold on. Okay. Gotcha, Jeff. Godless wants to address that, and I want to let him. So my question to Godless is that evidence or is that another story, and does he even have it right?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, in that story, I mean, that's what Paul does, but that is a very specific situation that Paul is, asking about that particular person. He's not making a generalized statement about whether or not slaves should be kept or held or anything like that. In fact, I believe the purpose of that was that Paul wanted Philemon as his traveling partner or his helper or something like that. So he sent him back and this is like a courtesy for between Christians and everything like that. So this is not a broad statement about slavery or anything like that. And twisting it to be about slavery on the whole is just disingenuous.
Yeah. And my follow-up to that is I asked for evidence and you gave me another story. I don't know where the story exists. Is it in the letters of Paul, or is this a separate book that's not in the Bible? I don't know, but it's just another story. I'm asking about what evidence you have that any of this is real. Why should I believe any of this? What are your thoughts, Jeff?
What is real?
You claimed that there is a spirit God. What evidence do you have that there is, in fact, a spirit God? That's what I'm asking. Why do you believe that? And what evidence do you have to support that belief?
Well, it's harmony.
Okay, so look at the trees. All right, got it.
The love that people share with one another.
Is there? Okay, we got to go, but I'll ask you one more question. Is it possible that the love that you feel and experience, which I agree is real, it's a real experience. I've experienced a lot of love, a lot of loss, all sorts of emotions. Is it possible that that could happen without a God?
I don't think anything in this reality that we live in can happen without a God.
All right. I thank you for the call. Do you have any other questions, Godless?
Nothing that's going to get us off this call quicker.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Jeff. I'll call back if you have something more evidence. I think Jeff's been smoking too much of that Easter grass, if you ask me. He sounded like it was a bit all over the place. So I know, Godless, you have to go. We have one other call. We can take that after you leave. I wanted to thank you so much. Unless you have time, I don't want to press your time. Yeah.
I think I've only got about 15 minutes before I can go, and I don't think that can probably be handled in the next 15 minutes.
Okay. So I wanted to thank Godless. I'm going to hang out one more and take this call. We also have our backup caller, Ben, can come on and help me out. But I really wanted to thank you. Without you here, I don't think any of these calls would have gone the way that they did, because you've got such extensive knowledge of this stuff. You have been researching this for so long. It's really impressive, especially because when you think about the fact that other people that come close to your knowledge have gone to seminary and things like that. And I don't think you ever did anything like that. Is that correct?
Oh, no, I've read a lot of journal articles and everything. And I've read a lot of books on stuff. So yeah. Yep.
It's impressive. It is impressive. I don't think I've ever been on a show with you where we've had a call where you weren't knowledgeable about something the call was about, especially as it relates to the historicity of Jesus or what the Bible actually says, like all of these calls we're about today. So thank you so much. I know that you have been hard at work all over the place. And I know that generally, if people want to find you, they should just Google Godless Engineer, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, you could Google it, but I'm pretty much Godless Engineer everywhere. So yeah,
perfect.
You'll be able to find me.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Any closing things you want to say to our viewers on this good Easter?
Not just, praise the Lich King Lord, and I guess I will see all of you heathens next month.
All right. Thank you so much. I will see you soon. All right. I am going to read a super chat here. I don't know if Ben's available, but Ben could come on and we could take this last call from Alex. We have a super chat from Miranda Rensberger, member for 1 year, for $10. It says, but you're not sticking to the caller's scripts. How can they prove you wrong if you say something they didn't want you to say? That is a very, very common experience we have. And I will tell our audience now, one of the things that we get as feedback, and it's split. Why do you let these callers rant so much? Why do you cut these callers off? We get those in equal measure, which I think means we're in some sort of sweet spot about that particular issue. My goal is to try to work in as many calls as possible, but for the ones that I think are special, the first one we had today, for example, I try to go longer and more detailed. If somebody's calling in with the 8th time, they say, look at the trees, that's why I know there's a God, that's not as interesting to me. And I don't think that's as interesting to our viewers. So sometimes I hear people veer off into areas where they're trying to avoid the question and start talking about something else without answering the question. I will cut them off then. Or if they're trying to monologue, or if all it was a yes or no question and they don't answer that question. So that does happen sometimes. But on the other hand, I want to let people make their case. My ask of my callers is, if you're getting onto the air, be ready to make your case. Be ready to be cross-examined, to be ready to have people who don't believe the same thing you ask for evidence and ask, what about this that seems to contradict your claim? Be ready for those. And if you are, I think we'll have a very productive conversation. Hi, Ben.
Hi, how's it going, Cross-Examiner? Good to see you.
Doing great. I'm so glad you're able to come on. Ben is a longtime ACA person. He is a backup on a lot of calls. He's been on other calls as well. And it's good to have people around for situations like this where we're running a little long, but I've got a caller that I think will be interesting. So thanks for coming on. How are you doing? What are you up to on this happy Easter?
Yeah, just doing good. Just been enjoying my time sitting in the studio listening to you and Godless Engineer do such an awesome job on all those calls that you've had so far. There's been some zany ones. And I wanted to say to the thing from the comment from Miranda Rensberger, I think you hit it pretty spot on. A lot of people call in, they don't seem to understand that, and you can do this in your real life too, is if people are wanting to monologue or they have this big, long explanation for things, but you recognize that there's something you disagree with early, it actually expedites time, and it can make for better conversation if you hit that right off the bat and you say, hey, hold on, before I let you keep going, we got to deal with this thing, because you can build a whole house of cards, but this one thing can still wreck it. I might agree with everything else that happens, but this thing right off the bat, we have a problem there, so we need to talk about that.
Yeah, if you come in and you say, premise 1, everything that exists began to exist.
Right.
I need to stop you right there. We need to talk about that. You can't let you cite that premise and then go on all to the rest in your conclusion and say, okay, now let's go all the way back to the beginning. And I think it's a function of people not being used to having these types of conversations. The conversations where you say, hold on, let's go about this incredibly slowly. Premise 1 is X. Do we agree on that? Let's explore it. Let's define it. Let's make sure we understand it. And if we can agree on that, then we'll move on to premise 2, with the caveat of, if we redefine or change terms or come to a different understanding, we may have to go back anyway. People don't normally have those conversations in their lives. And I think that contributes to people not being as participatory in conversations where skepticism is the rule, right? You are not given social permission to slow down. Wait a second, define terms. Yeah. I'm not sure I agree with you there. There's a social pressure to just nod and let the person keep speaking.
Yeah, people like to just dominate things and roll forward. And then if you don't address something, or you do address something, it gives them the flexibility to try to hit on, oh, well, you didn't talk about this thing I said, or you're focusing on this other thing, when real dialogue is that breaking things down, and it's a back and forth on every point.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, are you ready to talk to Alex?
Yeah, let's do it. Absolutely.
All right. We're talking to Alex, who says this is he, him from Britain. looks like Birmingham, biblical accuracy and trustworthiness, but there's no opinion there. So Alex, if you're still on the line calling from Britain at this hour, or maybe you're not in Britain, are you with us? And what do you have to say about biblical accuracy and trustworthiness?
Yeah, so first time calling in, can you hear me fine?
We can. Thank you so much, Alex.
Great. I've just recently began deconstructing around New Year time from being a Christian for like 2 or 3 years, and I just wanted to, it's not like, I'm not here trying to like argue or prove anything. I've just got some questions and I want to see what your thoughts on it are. That's about it.
Sounds good. Show, give us your first question.
So, sorry for the bit slow. It's my first time.
I do have one question before you get going. I know there's a little bit of delay here. It sounds like you're on speakerphone. If that's true, can you pick up? I think we'll get a little better sound because I'm finding a little hard to hear. There's a bit of an echo. So with that said, please do continue, Alex.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know what the speakerphone thing's about. I'm on my PC, so I'm not sure what that problem is. Sorry. So, yeah, so with biblical trustworthiness, when I used to be Christian, I would blindly accept everything and I wouldn't like question things as much. And when big questions did come up, I would just try and use mental gymnastics to justify it, or I'd ignore it because it's uncomfortable. And, you know, sometimes you lose that kind of motivation to critically think about things. And that's why I wanted to call on this show with the deconstruction. So my first question was, what do you really think of, I guess, the interpretations of biblical text? Because, you know, sometimes things are seen as literal, and then as time goes on, when science or history challenges that, they make it metaphorical. And obviously, in some contexts, when you look at the different contexts of the Bible, because it's a collection of books, that can work. But when it attacks things like the idea of a global flood or original sin or human origin, and they start saying that's metaphorical or whatever, that's a core doctrine of Christianity. So that's what, and I think it falls apart under that scrutiny. So I just want to know what you think of that.
I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear Ben's thoughts on that.
Sure, yeah. There's, especially from the atheistic perspective, whereas from an outsider looking in, there's thousands of interpretations. We've actually done studies that indicate that most people's interpretations or their understanding of what God's saying is actually just their own mind and their own opinion. So there's arguably as many interpretations and as many gods as there are people that believe in them. But when looking at these different translations or interpretations, I don't know how much if you've taken the time and studied logical fallacies. There's a lot of them out there, like the no true Scotsman fallacy, or the Texas sharpshooter or cherry picking fallacy, that come up a lot in those interpretations. And it's basically picking and choosing or defining something as, oh, the things I disagree with, that's not the true version of that. And again, as an outside person looking in at Christianity, when I see any kind of faith or any kind of doctrine or ideology, those are kind of the things I'm looking for. If you're saying, oh, well, no true person would believe that or would take it that way, that's kind of a red flag. It doesn't mean they're necessarily wrong, but it's indicative of something that doesn't have consistency, or it's really just coming down to a person's opinion rather than actually having empirical or objective evidence behind it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I come at it from a similar position. I also come at it from, I think another thing that Alex was alluding to was a bit of a moving the goalposts. Like, hey, this was literal until it was proven it couldn't be literal. It's kind of like a previous caller. Well, the moon was split. Well, why is it not split now? Well, obviously it must have been mended, right? It's this post hoc rationalization of what we're dealing with. I think what I see in that area is people are raised, I think a good number of people are raised to believe in the premise. The premise is there's a good God and he loves you. Jesus loves me. Yes, he does. You know, all of those sorts of things. And then when they start reading scripture, they go to Bible class, and Bible class teaches them, oh, well, we're going to talk on this verse and this verse and this verse and this verse. None of the controversial ones, all the ones that say love, peace, and happiness. And then later people start bringing up the problem ones. And early on, there's a rationalization. It's that cognitive dissonance. Well, everybody around me says God is good and the Bible is true. All the things I've read in the Bible so far tell me that God is good and it's true. And now you're bringing up this one thing, so there must be an interpretation problem. My go-to response to all of that is what I said earlier on the show. If this is allegedly the single most important message to your existence and the existence of all of humanity and the purpose of the creation of the entire universe, wouldn't the book have been clearer about which passages are metaphors or allegories and which passages are literally true? That's what I come down to, is like, I can make all the other observations, but this God supposedly chose to write a message at a time when there was no cameras, there was no DNA evidence, there was no science developed. It was all eyewitnesses who then told these stories, if they were witnesses at all, for generations until somebody wrote them down in now dead languages. And then we don't have the originals of any of this stuff. And then after that, they were translated and mistranslated and copied by scribes that we know inserted all sorts of errors by accident and on purpose, and then translated again. We just had a caller who wanted to use the King James version instead of the NIV, instead of the NRUV. That's the best way to convey this message. And I have chapters in the book where the character of Jesus is saying, verily, verily, truly, truly. That's what I would say if I meant, I'm not kidding, this is literal, ask for what you want and you'll get it type of thing. So when I take that approach, I'm like, what's more likely? What is more likely in my experience? That is how the omnipotent creator of the entire universe chose to convey the most important message to all of mankind and the reason the entire universe even exists. That's how he chose it. Or some guys wrote a book and people took it a little too seriously and now are trying to rationalize it. Does that help, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite interested with what you said. Obviously it's meant to be a book of universal truths, and it's probably been shaped to fit some overarching narratives. But what you've put about it being a bit inconsistent and a bit vague for being, something to do with eternity and morality and human origin. I see what you're saying there. I appreciate the response. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Our pleasure.
You said you had multiple questions. What's your next one?
Right. So I don't know how much you really argue about like the morality of the Bible. I mean, I've sat through a lot of argues about slavery, so I assume that's a comfortable topic.
Yes, we do. I take exception with what is portrayed to be the quote unquote good book when I can point to lots of things in it that I find to be immoral under any yardstick. The biggest of which is the concept of hell or damnation or some sort of punishment for existing. And that the fact that punishment is supposedly eternal. Eternal punishment for finite crime goes against everything I can possibly imagine if you really take seriously the idea of eternal punishment. So I think the entire book portrays a morality of Bronze Age goat herders who didn't know where the sun goes at night. They came up with these stories, told them to each other, and eventually these stories were written down, and that's your Old Testament. Then later on, we get the New Testament where people were like, well, we need to love too. It can't be 600 and whatever laws where the answer to violating most of these laws is we stone you to death. Why don't we add some love stuff, but then add a part that says, verily, verily, again, I come not to do away with the laws, but to fulfill them. The laws they're talking about is the Old Testament. And it was Godless who read it earlier. Like nothing will change in the laws, not a jot or tittle, if we want to use the King James language, until all is fulfilled, which most people agree. It means until everything is at the end of times. So I don't know about you, Ben, what your take on the morality of the Bible is. I suspect you have some issues. What are your thoughts?
Oh, sure. Yeah. As I say to Alex, we only get to take the calls that we get. Oftentimes slavery ends up coming up, and that is kind of the topic through which morality or how do we determine our morality comes from. But there are older episodes where people called in to say, how can you be moral and be an atheist? And we have our host responding to that. I think some really great resources, if you're wanting to look into that, is look up the Divine Command Problem with the Euthyphro, or Kierkegaard with Fear and Trembling. And those were some older philosophical texts that are assessing, like, where does morality come from? Is it divinely inspired? Can it be divinely inspired? Can you trust it if it's divinely inspired? Because we don't know the mind of God. And yeah, most of, especially you were talking about the interpretations, oftentimes those interpretations are based on what that person feels morally inside themselves, and then they're going to basically impose their own morals on what's in this book. And we see that all the time with, like, the interpretations of the Ten Commandments. I think one of my favorite examples is in New Orleans or Louisiana right now. They recently passed a Ten Commandments bill, but the Christians couldn't decide on which 10 or what interpretation of those 10 they would have up on the walls in all their schools. So there's actually 11 Ten Commandments in the state of Louisiana, and I think that's really funny.
Yes, it's one of my favorite examples as well. It's horrifying that they're doing it, but the fact that it's 11 commandments in the state where previously they passed a law, or they introduced a bill, saying we're going to make the Bible the official book of Louisiana, and then during committee or during debates, they couldn't agree on which version of the Bible, so they dropped the issue altogether. So what are your thoughts there, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with different people interpreting things, because people adhere to what, sorry, it's difficult to put into words, but humans naturally seek to create narratives and patterns out of things. It's part of evolution. But I was thinking less about specific arguments and more about, like, moral objectivity and subjectivity, because I see all the time people claiming in support of the Bible that it's like, we need moral universal grounding, or we don't know what's good and bad, or it's in human nature. But when I've read through the Bible or watched debates like this or listened to other people speak about what they think of it, I think it kind of, just in my opinion, disproves their own claim, because when you say things like the difference between the New and the Old Testament, they say, oh, well, it was God working with the culture of the time or coming down to their level. Or
yeah.
I don't know.
Morals are either objective or either morality is objective and God has conveyed it to us, or God can change his mind. And then is it still objective in that case?
Or with respect, this is often said regarding slavery, and the reason we go to slavery so often is it's the easiest one, right? It should be the most obvious to the most people, and it's a way to shortcut all the others. Ben, you are a bald man, and if children came up and teased you about being bald, would you want an angry God to send bears after them to maul them to death?
This may come surprising to a lot of theists out there. No, I would not.
No, so there's lots of examples in the Bible, but we go to, I mean, that's a simple one, the bearded guy, but it sounds like fairy tale and all that. Slavery is very objective. So yeah, I think that that when we get into this morality question, objective versus subjective, they don't really have a leg to stand on, because they have to go to, well, it's objective because it's what God wants. And we're like, okay, so it's subjective with respect to what God's wishes are. Well, God can't help do anything other than what is good, because goodness is the nature of God. Okay, so it's something that morals come from somewhere outside of God. God is constrained by the morality that he's dictating in the Bible. He has no choice to do this. Well, that's not exactly what we meant. And then they get caught in this loop of trying to be subjective and objective at the same time. I will give another resource. Ben gave a lot of good ones. Matt Dillahunty gave a presentation, a speech 10, 12 years ago. There's a video of it called Superiority of Secular Morality. It's a really good take on this issue. It gave me an interesting framework for framing this discussion, and it has helped me in having this discussion with other people. And if you have not seen it, I recommend you do go watch it. So what are your thoughts on that, Alex?
Yeah, well, I'll definitely check that out. I've just written it down.
Yeah, it's Matt Dillahunty. You just Google superiority of a secular morality, and you'll come up with his presentation.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting because there's obviously a lot of mental gymnastics that go into entertaining different ideas, and obviously it's even if there is a bit of consistency, it's a compilation of like 66, 70 something books. So there's going to be different agendas. I mean, you could argue the books in like Exodus are to do with, I guess, survival of that primal society and like the social needs of the time. And then you look at the New Testament and it seems like an entirely different story.
It is. It definitely is. Different authors, different time, different era. It is very different. But the secular morality piece abstracts higher than that and says, hey, I'll give you the 10-cent version. All right. I get accused, this is sort of the presentation, I get accused of saying, hey, your morality is subjective. And to that, I would say, the rule of my morality is subjective. I think that my rule should be every decision should consider whether or not, every action should consider whether or not it increases well-being of humans, right? And we could just take that as an abstract, like that's the goal. That choice of that being the goal is somewhat subjective. I am agreeing with that goal. That is my choice. However, I think there is a natural law of things that says, hey, maybe that is implicit in our nature that, life is preferable to death, pleasure is preferable to pain, those sorts of things. And if you take that as the subjective choice of what your moral rule will be, then everything that flows from it can be evaluated, sort of like a game of chess is the analogy he uses. The rules for the game of chess were invented by men. They're subjective. They're arbitrary to some degree. And then now that we have the rules, we can say, okay, is this move, pawn to e4, is that a good move, a bad move? How good is it? How bad is it? And we may not agree on every move. It can be a gray area. Even computers can be like, it doesn't really change the bar too much. So that's the gist of it. But I encourage you to go listen to that presentation because he really dives through every argument, every counter argument, and gives you a framework to say, you know what? Not only do I think my morality is subjective, I think all of morality is subjective. So within that framework, here's why I think the secular morality is better than this divine command stuff that we see in the Bible and other books. All right, we're way past time. Alex, do you have any last comments or questions?
No, I won't keep you. I know it's been quite, I've had a long wait and you guys are probably very tired after all the mental gymnastics that everyone's been going on. So.
Ben says he's just getting started. I do apologize for the long wait. We definitely had a lot of calls today, but I was really glad I could get you in. Please do call back again, either when I'm on or anybody else is on, if you have other questions. It is totally natural to have a lot of questions when you're sort of starting to question things or well along your journey. I still have questions today that I will bounce off of people of like, whoa, this seems interesting. What's going on here? And I'm open to being convinced. I just haven't yet.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Alex.
Yeah,
go ahead,
check
Ben.
out our other shows. They tend to get slightly less call volume sometimes, so it can be easier to get on because, like AXP, we try to prioritize theist callers, or even just like clarify if you're currently deconstructing your belief. We try to prioritize those too. So we have Truth Wanted, we have Talk Heathen, our two other options you can try to call in on Friday, and then before this show on Sundays. So there's other opportunities for you to try to call in, so maybe you don't have to wait. You've been on 2 hours. Thank you for that.
All right. So thanks so much, Alex. I'll drop you now. Look forward to hearing from you again. Ben, I want to thank you. Our listeners, I want to thank you. Let me check and see if we have any more. It doesn't appear we have any more super chats. We're going to wrap it up here. Ben.
Yeah.
Are you going to be on a show again sometime soon? I love being on with you.
I appreciate that. Likewise.
You're always there in the background, ready to fill in. I want to do more shows with you. So what are your thoughts?
I think that's up to the fates. I'm on the board, so I'll never use that kind of muscle.
You're on the board. Oh.
Yeah. So I'm not going to use my muscle to be like, I have to be on the show. I leave that to the experts when they do and don't need me on. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. From a legal perspective, just so our audience knows, if you're on a board of a thing and you start becoming a person that's managed by the board because you're on the show, there's a conflict of interest and all that stuff. So I get it now. You just need to quit the board.
I will be here at their behest whenever they need it, and it's always such a joy and privilege. I was a fan of these shows for years before I ever had this opportunity to work with the organization. So it feels like a gift every time I get to be on here.
Absolutely same. I was a huge fan, still am, of all the old hosts, all the new hosts. It's amazing how it's evolved. And I think for our audience, thank you for continuing to listen and supporting us. I know there's a lot of stuff going on out there. Some is for profit, so they can get into other stuff that we don't get into. But as a charity, you know that we are doing good, trying to especially work on separation of church and state, especially these days when we have policies by government officials who may not obey court orders. And if they decide to set up the Church of the United States, nobody's going to stop them. So organizations like ours and other charities that work hard on spreading the word about atheism is not what you think it is. It's just not being convinced of something, and it's not a bad word, and we shouldn't have only one set of people with one set of religious beliefs controlling our government. I think that's a good thing. So please do continue to support the ACA as well as other organizations around the country that do this. If you are in another area of the world where you run into similar problems, I'm sure you've got those local organizations too. And I'll let Ben have the final word for our audience.
Well, yeah, if you are looking to get involved and you're in the local area, check out our website. I think Graham mentioned it early in the show, but I'll say it again, atheist-community.org. We have a calendar on there, so we do have events in the building. I recently stepped in to be the volunteer coordinator for the organization, so we're starting to build out additional volunteer opportunities around here. We're going to try doing tabling. We're doing different events like potlucks and things like that to bring in people and give them a place where they can find solidarity and friendship and community. So check that out. We have a lot going on. It's pretty fun to watch this slowly build and develop.
Thank you so much, Ben. I couldn't have said any better. Get involved if you can. Even if you're not around here, get involved. You'll have local meetups. So thank you, Ben. Always a pleasure.
Always.
And we'll see everybody next week. We're always here, Sundays at 4:30 Central. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.